Hey you guys, it's Irene Lyon here, and what you have here is a long form episode, a Facebook Live that I did in my Healthy Nervous System Revolution Facebook group. If you're not over there, be sure to check it out. I've linked that below. But I answer a bunch of questions that were sent in via email and in the forum. I cover everything from whether or not things like EFT and TRE, which is trauma release exercises, are good for the nervous system. I cover what the vagus nerve is. I cover what somatic experiencing is, trauma, a lot. So there's a lot of information in this video. Have a look, have a watch. And like I said, if you haven't joined this group, be sure to do so after you check this video out. Take good care. For those of you who have never seen me on a Facebook Live, welcome. My name is Irene Lyon. I am the founder, the moderator, the key person that runs this great Facebook group that is growing so much. And please know that if you're here live right now and you can't watch the whole 75 minutes, this records. So you will be able to listen to this after the fact, watch it after the fact, and if you're watching this after the fact, thank you for taking some time to be here. I'm going to dive into some questions, and the one thing I want to stipulate first is as I'm answering questions, obviously this is going to be very intellectual, right? It's almost like a lecture. If you can, stay present to your body sensations. If you're new to this work, that might be a little foreign. You may not know exactly what that means. That's fine. But just know that as I work through and answer these questions, I will every now and again have you tune into this body space that you have, feel your connection with the environment. So maybe the chair you're sitting on, or maybe even just every now and again you may need to disengage from the video and just look around. And I do that too when I'm talking, because it's hard to just stare right into one spot. But the reason I suggest this is this theory isn't just theory. The questions that I'm going to answer, while they are all very intellectual, this nervous system work has this funny way of really piercing into the internal. And it's very different than other forms of work where we're learning something intellectually. It just tends to go into our cells in a much, much deeper way. So I want you to just pay attention to that, listen to your body responses, and really see when I'm answering a question, even if it's not your question, how does this resonate with you? Can you relate to it? Can you empathize? Does it make you kind of feel a little antsy, or does it kind of make you sleepy? These are all responses that your autonomic nervous system is giving you based on what I'm talking about. So, hey there everybody. Great to see everyone popping on. And I'm going to go for about 75 minutes. So hour, 75 minutes. Usually we have plenty to talk about. If you have a question, you can pop it into the comment, and I will be sure to get that from my amazing helper, Miss Erin. And if you have a comment based on something I'm talking about, be sure to put that in there too. I don't always see the feed, so be patient with me if I don't get to that right away. If I keep looking down, it's because I'm looking at my iPad that has comments coming in, because I can't see everything on my phone. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start out with a question that actually just came in literally a few seconds ago. It's from, we got it in via email from the Netherlands, and it's from a person by the name of Iris. I love that name. Love that name. So here's the question. I'm going to read it out first. Hey Irene, first of all, when as a health coach, I see clients suffer from trauma, I think that even doing after your courses, I will not always be able to help them with that, right? You are correct. And I will talk to this in a second. How do I know if they need more than my help? Which course should I do to help my clients the most? So this is a really good question, because I am many of you in this group work with people, whether you're a teacher, a coach, maybe you're a mind-body professional. I classify those as people that do yoga and Reiki, massage, body work, basically anything where you're helping people get better, heal, find more, freedom in their world, more health, all that. So it sounds like, Iris, that is what you do. Now, I would say, so this is a grand sweeping statement, pretty much if anybody is seeking out help to improve their life because they're stuck, because they can't organize things in their mind, maybe they're struggling with their businesses, maybe they have health problems, chronic fatigue, illness, trouble taking care of themselves, they can't eat well, they can't get out and exercise, they have trouble sleeping, they have trouble parenting, you name it. Pretty much anyone that is seeking out this kind of help has probably had some form of early trauma, shock trauma, adversity, and to be honest, pretty much all of us living in this world, if you are looking at an iPhone, a computer, an iPad, you're in the industrialized world where there is technology, it's first, second world. We are all living in some form of stress right now, mainly because we are not living in the way that our genetics, our DNA got brought into this world. In other words, tribal culture, hunter-gatherer culture, where there's small pods of us roaming the plains, getting our own food, killing our own food, being with our young 24/7. We don't have that. So because we have broken off of this sort of tribal hunter-gatherer way of life, right now in our current world, we are trying to figure out how to do it, right? We're trying to figure out how to do this. And as we know, a lot of what we're trying to do isn't working, right? So for those of you new to me, I'm very macro. I mean, I work with the micro, very specific, but I like to look big and macro. And the reason why is because we need to look at this, I believe, from this point of view. And so much of what we do and so much of how we live in these boxes and force ourselves to work certain hours a day with only a set amount of holiday per year. We don't get to stay with our babies for full when we birth them. Papas don't get to stay with their babies. They have to go out to work, or there's just so much stuff. Because of that, we are not living and we're not healing in the way that we can. So as an aside, the reason I'm saying this is if you are anyone working in the health healing industry, self-development industry, chances are every single person you've got seeing you has some kind of chronic stress, trauma, something. It does not mean that they're debilitated, but it's just something to be aware of, Iris. Yes, Sage, I will address all those questions. I got them yesterday and this morning, so I'll get to those once I get to this first one. So I actually have, Iris, a article, and Erin can post that up, called The 5 Telltale Signs That Your Coaching Clients Have Undiagnosed Trauma. This is an article I wrote well over a year ago, and it really spells out the steps, not the steps, but what to look for in your clients. And it's great for someone who isn't a coach to just even self-assess yourself, because there's things that we often don't think contribute to trauma being stuck in our nervous system, and we really want to look at those. What I've seen, Iris, is that when people have gone through my programs, my online programs, again, you ask this question in a moment, they start to see better in their clients if they can help their clients or if they need to refer them out. So that is, again, with more education, more knowledge, you start to be able to discern who you can keep working with or who may need some supplemental help with one of my colleagues, with my work, helping to heal past traumas that are stuck in the nervous system. And that's an important thing to know too, is that trauma, again, it's this broad term that we're just throwing out, but essentially trauma is not in an event per se. It's not in an accident, in an event, in what was said to us, what was done to us. It's in our body physiology, in our nervous system, in our stress chemistry. That is why we have to work with that in conjunction with the memories, the past experiences, to heal it fully. So you say also, for myself, I know I had childhood adversity. I suspect my mother was a narcissist through a mild one, and my father passive aggressive. Will your 21-day course be enough? How can I tell? And how much does your 12-week program cost? So again, this is a very common question. Is my programs, there's two of them. One is a 12-week program. We're actually in the middle of it right now with a group of amazing people. It's 12 weeks. It's called Smart Body, Smart Mind. It's an online nervous system rewire program. This course is $1,500 US, and then of course that can be paid out through a 12-month payment plan. That program is really comprehensive, and it's 12 weeks, but it's more than 12 weeks. So when you join that program, you're getting really a comprehensive understanding of all that you need to know around autonomic nervous system physiology, what trauma actually is, what it takes to heal it, and then lots and lots of practical experience, my signature neurosensory exercises that lead you through what I call the proper sequencing of neuroplastic healing. And this program, it's hard for me to say it's just a 12-week program because it's something that you will keep forever. I have alumni in there who have been doing the program over 3 sessions, and they're still learning, they're still growing, they're still releasing traumas, because we're always refining, we're always discovering new layers. So the 12-week program is really what I recommend most people do if they know they have childhood adversity, they know they had this kind of toxic environment. You mentioned a very narcissistic mother, a passive-aggressive father. Those two tend to go well together. But what happens is it creates a toxic environment for the kids. And then the kids have to go into survival physiology to cope, to survive. And then we as kids in that environment create all sorts of interesting patterns in our body physiology, in our mental state, that eventually lead us to have trouble in life, whether it's with our physical body, with our organ systems, or with our mental state, or usually both. So that's my 12-week program. It's $1,500 US. Now, I developed the 21-day nervous system tune-up, which is self-study. That's $200 US, paid at once. That program has been curated from my 12-week program. The reason why is I only run the 12-week course twice a year. So if someone comes into my world and they can't sign up for the 12-week program, which would be now, for instance, you cannot join the 12-week program. We're into week 6 already, or week 7 actually. If you want to start, which I recommend people do, you can start the 21 days and you actually get my signature Biology of Stress video training series, which is probably one of the more comprehensive trainings that exist that isn't doing a full-on somatic experiencing training itself. So you get those 5 Biology of Stress videos, and you get 6 of my neurosensory exercises that get you started on learning how to sense your body, sense your environment, etc. And actually, there is an article that I just posted on my blog with someone who's in the 21-day program. Her name is Dee. She was willing to share her story, but she has done the 21-day program, but she's only done like 6 days of it. She's going very slowly at her own pace, and she has a pretty cool story to share. So Erin, if you can pop that article up from Dee, which was just a few days or a week or so ago. Basically, this woman had been living in fear for so long, and just this last year was the first time she has ever ridden a bike with her daughter, and her daughter is 12. And it's because she has learned to get into her nervous system, understand the theory of what trauma actually is, what the nervous system is, how it all works, and is looking at things from a much more intellectual and self-aware place. And this is what's really important, super important for those that are new to me. The theory is in some ways just as important as the practical. And time again, my students have said, by knowing the theory and the education, everything makes sense. And they can go into their therapy sessions, their massage sessions, their parenting world, how they work with people, and they just start to see things in a different way. So the 21-day course is a little self-study starter course. It's a taste. And if a person really wants to go the full level, then I always suggest they take the 12 weeks, because your life will change. Your entire outlook will change. And this is just from watching my alumni. So the next thing Iris asks, one of my problems I have due to my past is that I'm an underachiever. I procrastinate. I feel unworthy and have issues with making money. I'm afraid your 12-week course is way beyond my budget. This makes total sense. It is definitely a big price point. And you get what you pay for. So while it is a big investment off the bat, even if you pay over 12 months, it's still a lot of money. I totally appreciate that and respect that. And what you get in this will help untease all these pieces of unworthiness, fear, procrastination, because all this stuff, it's not in the mind. It's not in the mind. It's in our survival physiology that's afraid to go out, or afraid to speak, afraid to set boundaries. You mentioned you had really toxic environment with your mother, narcissist, father, passive aggressive. When we have that kind of modeling, we get stunted because it is unsafe to be ourselves. It is unsafe to go out in the world. It is unsafe to stamp down and say, this is what I want and this is what I want to do, because we don't know what's going to happen to us when we're really little. And so we stunt ourselves. We kind of bleach ourselves out of all essential qualities of feeling and being in tune and following our impulses. And from what I've seen in running my own business and in the many people I've worked with and seen who are struggling to make money and are struggling to find where they want to be in the world, it's this internal drive that is not in the mind, it is in the physiology. Our physiology has to feel safe to put ourselves out there. If we don't feel safe in our system, we're never going to put ourselves out there. We can fill out handouts and make to-do lists and create all sorts of marketing funnels and ebooks and blog posts and websites and graphics and all this stuff that's all said, and it's all great, it's important. But if we don't have an internal drive to put it out there and feel good about it, we will never get started. And it comes down to, how were we able to put ourselves out there when we were 2 years old? When we cried when we were a baby, were we attended to? Or were we shushed right away? When we were upset, were we left alone to cry ourselves to sleep? Or were we soothed? Did we learn how to self-soothe ourselves? All these things, it seems so far away. You know, when you're a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 30-year-old and you're struggling with getting going with life and, let's say, career, the last thing we think about was, how did we get parented? But that is everything. How we were parented and how our parents were parented makes all the difference in the world. If we didn't get it, which you are saying you didn't based on this childhood adversity, we definitely want to work on that. The next question you have, which is a tricky one, you say, I'm Dutch, and since I have Dutch clients, not all will be able to follow your trainings in English.
So if I find that a client needs more than I can give them, how can I find someone who is suitable here in the Netherlands? Do you have a list of practitioners that you approve of? So obviously all my trainings are in English. I found that many people from the Netherlands do speak English, so I would like to hope that more of the Dutch folk can learn through me through English. Of course, not everyone will. I don't have any Dutch practitioners per se that I know of, but if you look up somatic experiencing and you go to their main membership site, you might be able to find some people within the Netherlands that speak Dutch. Again, not my area that I know of. I'm not connected so much with the European SE community, but you might be able to find some. So that's where you want to go. So the next thing you also ask is, I'll funnel back, this is a long question, is what more might you need to do to help your clients? There's two ways of looking at this. One is you enter into my programs, you stay within the scope of practice of being a coach, which is great, and you just have a different outlook. You might be able to guide people to just sense their bodies in a different way, allow them to be present to what exists. But you really are kind of stopped there. You can't work with specific trauma pieces, helping them regulate their nervous system from that deep level. If you know you want to keep within your scope of practice, then heading into my programs is a really good way to do it. Many of my alumni are already doing that. However, if you in your feelings, in your body, if you know you want to help people really navigate and heal trauma, then what I suggest is also sticking around with my work, and looking into a somatic experiencing training, whether that is in Europe or through myself. This is something I'm about to look at and put together, hopefully in the next year, is a somatic experiencing training here in Canada that bridges in the work that I do, but within the guise of the Somatic Experiencing Training Institute. So this is something that I've just started to look at. Your next question, have I ever heard of past reality integration? No, I have not. What are your thoughts on EFT? So EFT, I get this question all the time. So EFT is that tapping where we tap in different places and we basically say words around taking care of ourselves. And even though I have this thought, I fully love and accept myself. So the first issue with this is that it's very verbal, it's very cognitive. If someone has had deep early trauma, which many people have, even if you came from a good family with lots of money, food, shelter, mom and dad were secure, they had jobs, there is a ton of emotional neglect and misattunement that occurs in affluent upper class households. So this is another thing for those of you that work with people, or perhaps you fall into this boat and you're not sure why you're struggling with moving ahead in world with emotions. Typically it's that early misattunement that we just haven't figured out in the Western world. The tapping thing, often the words that come out are, even though I'm feeling this thought of XYZ, I completely and fully love and accept myself. If we did not have a biological imprint of love and acceptance, like we didn't feel it from our gut as an infant, saying those words is absolutely useless because it's only going into the cognition, and that trauma, that early misattunement is pre-verbal. So to try to talk our way, even though we might be putting this into meridian lines, it's not enough. And I've talked to many of my clients and EFT practitioners who have gone through the nervous system work, who have done somatic experiencing trainings, and they will say it's a wonderful tool for coping. It's a wonderful tool for management, for helping a person stay present to their current mind. By tapping, clearly you're getting into the body, but it is not going to rewire past trauma. It will not help get the system regulated again. It won't help deactivate. Now, if you have an EFT practitioner that has training say, even in my level of work through my 12-week program or the somatic experiencing training or the equivalent, which would be sensory motor psychotherapy. This is the work of Pat Ogden. However, she did come from Peter Levine's world. If you have someone with that training on board and then you do the EFT with them, if they are with you and can pause you when they notice a physiological response and you stop the tapping and then you go into the body and you sense it and you work from that somatic point of view, tracking sensation, looking for procedural memories that are stored in the system, then this might work. But as an alone, the way that it's being promoted, mass scale, like it's this tonic for the nervous system for healing trauma, it's completely false. And this is from my own experience, talking with others. It's just not enough. Now, I saw a thing come through here on TRE. So, Iris, I hope that's answered your question. There's a lot to unpack, I know. Hopefully this has helped other people who are coaches and wanting to work with their people. And here's the thing. If you are a coach in this world, you are going to come up against this over and over and over now, because more awareness is being brought to the nervous system, trauma, how it's stuck in the body, early adversity, childhood abuse. The cat's out of the bag, so to speak. So this means that for all of you who want to continue helping people at this coach level, you're going to have to make some important decisions. Either you learn more just for yourself so you know how to see it, so you can refer people out, or you make the leap and decide to get trained in this work so that you can do this work for the people that come to you. I highly suggest the latter, because we need more people that can work at this level. Because think about it, there's a lot of people in first world countries who are going to be looking for this work, and there are not enough people right now trained to do this work. So someone's just asked, I'm not going to pronounce your name correctly. Marta? Ooh. So hello from the Netherlands. What is your opinion on TRE? So TRE is trauma releasing exercises. This is something that David Berceli founded. He is the founder of it. And I'm going to actually say via word for word what Peter Levine said. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm trained in something called somatic experiencing. I'm also trained in something called the Feldenkrais method. I kind of blend the two together, but my main focus is somatic experiencing. The founder of somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, he's still alive. He's in his 70s. I was just with him a few weeks ago in the Bay Area, helping assist at a master class that he runs many times a year. And someone asked about TRE, and this is what I know about TRE, so I'm just reiterating what he solidified, and that is, he even was like, never use TRE for anything complex. It was not developed to work with complex trauma, early adversity, surgical trauma, chronic abuse. It isn't for that. It was developed to work with people in the field when they've just experienced a trauma. And it was developed in war-torn countries. I think Berceli was, forgive me, David, if I'm getting this wrong, he was in Africa, somewhere where there was bombing, things were not safe, and he helped people release the stress in the moment by getting them to shake. Beautiful in those countries, these second and third world countries, where many of those adults and kids have a regulated nervous system, right? So this is what's interesting. These people in these second and third world countries tend to be more regulated because of the tight-knit communities. Mom is always with the baby. There's no daycare, right? You're with these kids, and the life is much more simple. Kids roam. They just have a better, simpler life. Therefore, they get good attunement and good building of their nervous system. The crappy thing is they've got that going for them, but then they have this environment that's hostile and volatile and under war, famine, etc., disease. And so they then are inflicted with these external traumas, even though their system is solid. with that kind of a person, the TRE will work beautifully because their capacity is already really high. In our more affluent cultures of North America and Europe, Australia, etc., even parts of Asia, most of us have very little capacity. We're living in a very small nervous system capacity, very little capacity to sense, little capacity to feel, little capacity to be in overwhelm because of the way we were raised. Therefore, when we go into these modes that are trying to mount up a really big reaction to release, we don't have the mental map, the body map to navigate these extremes, and one of two things will happen in a TRE session. A person will override their sensation and they'll shut down. They'll go through the motions maybe of the shaking and the tremoring, but they're not integrating it. Or they feel the intensity, and rather than overriding it and shutting down, they spike up and they literally go into too much arousal, and it's like their system blows up and they can't contain everything that they're feeling. So Peter's words were, and I've never heard him be so no. He's like, never use that for types of trauma that are chronic, early, developmental, because it's just not developed for that. But what's happening is it's being used for everyone because it's easy, right? It's easy. It's just a set of ways of going into the body and tremoring, shaking. But to heal a lot of early trauma, it has nothing to do with tremoring and shaking. Nothing. Someone who is in that mode of learning how to re-regulate their nervous system and heal deep, deep wounds of misattunement, abandonment, neglect, the shaking response really doesn't fit. They weren't blasted by a big bomb. They weren't frightened by a big tiger, by being held down in a surgical environment. It's more this lack of connection, this deep shame, this deep sense that no one is there for me. There's no safety. So that's my thoughts on TRE, and that's also Peter's thoughts on TRE. So it's very important to look at these methods that are coming out right now with kind of an observant eye, and to not jump into them in a way that is like popping some supplements, right? It's just our nervous system is so delicate. Yeah, it is shocking. There's a lot of practitioners on YouTube. It's absolutely appalling. We're in a zone right now of healing where this general education is not known, and there's many people who are doing this stuff with no training, with no background. They've taken this course because it's become the new hot topic, very much like EFT was or is, and we're hurting people. We're hurting people, and a lot of these people will leave and they will not come back because of the shame. It's like, I just went to this class that's supposed to be bang on for helping trauma, and I feel worse. Like, what's with that? There must be something wrong with me, right? And we lose a lot of people. It's even the same with yoga. A lot of people go to yoga. A lot of people go to 5 Rhythms dance classes, and it's too intense. They leave and they think, well, I must be totally broken or whatever. And then they don't understand why their system is now no longer being able to focus, why their digestion is off, why they can't sleep at night. Barbara asks, when the system blows up and they can't contain the experience, what is the proper follow-up to that? The real follow-up is the nervous system work. It's teaching them how to contain their experience, learning to feel safe again. Most of the people that go into these classes, for instance, like TRE, their baseline safety isn't there. That's why they're there. So we can almost assume that when someone is going and seeking out these trauma sold kind of programs, herding the cattle all into one room and let's just do the shaking exercise, we can pretty much guarantee that there's something in that person's system that is already unsafe. They're there for a reason, and we need to teach these practitioners, I think, these elements so that they know how to educate people, contain their experience. So even if someone is still going to practice TRE, there are a lot of steps that can be taken to teach those teachers what to look out for, what to do, what not to do. And some of my colleagues in the SE world are also trained in TRE, and I know that they would agree that there needs to be a different kind of containment, a different kind of safety, lots of permission, so that a person can say stop, right? But when we were brought up not being allowed to say stop or I don't like that, that is so ingrained in us to not say stop and say I don't like that, because it meant death in the family system. So yeah, Kathy says TRE was developed to treat I can never say this word, catastrophe, such as town bombings. Exactly, that's what I just mentioned. That is how it was developed. It was not developed to heal developmental trauma and early trauma. I'm going to go to a question that Barbara posted earlier. Will your SE training that's in development include pieces of somatic practice, Kathy Kane's work in Feldenkrais, but still carry SE accreditation? So Barbara, this is all really new to me. It was just a few weeks ago that I talked to some of my colleagues who organize SE trainings and who are retired faculty for the SE community. What would happen, this is what I'm thinking, and again I have to do some groundwork to find the trainers that would want to do this with me. I've come to realize that I can work with people one-on-one or in group to help them develop themselves in a really deep way and to have a better angle and viewpoint to see their clients if they work with clients. But what I'm finding, and I'm evolving in this work too, I'm not perfected what I'm doing either. As I work with you folks, because I know you're in the 12-week program, some of the questions I get are basically me having to teach you guys somatic experiencing, and ethically I cannot do that. I will not do that, just because I have a strong respect for Peter's work. And I've come to realize that if we want to take you guys further, we need to do it through the auspices of the Somatic Experiencing Training Institute, which is based in North America. So with that being said, my dream is to take people that are interested, who have gone through my 12 weeks, who already have a solid base, bring them into an SE training, which I have organized, or I've had someone help me organize, which is taught by SE faculty. We restructured a little differently so that it's easier for people to travel. Rather than 3 times a year, it's twice a year. But we make the training a little longer so that we're coming in a day or two early. We have a rest day in between, and then we have a few days on the end to do more Feldenkrais, to do more discussion, more practice. Because in a general SE training, and I've assisted at these trainings for years and years, there is not enough time to practice. There is not enough time for questions. There's not enough time to be put on the spot and tested. There isn't. And I actually think it's important to test people and to have more space to let this stuff sink in. And that's my hope, is to do something like that so that over the course of 3 years, because it would be roughly a 18-month to 3-year training, roughly, at the end of that time, the person that comes out of that, not only do they have the knowledge on board, but they have really done the work for themselves. They have really infused it into their lives, into their culture, into how they interact in their own families. The people that I see that really struggle after they've done the SE training are typically the ones who are trained more in cognitive behavioral therapies, who have been so trained to look at the psyche and not the body. And the reason why they struggle is because there's not enough time spent at the outset getting them into their bodies. So that's kind of how that will work. And yes, Kathy Kane would not just be, her knowledge wouldn't just be imparted through text. She would actually be there teaching you guys, because she teaches the advanced levels of the SE training. So this is my dream. So if you guys are listening to this and this is what you would like to do, just send good vibes to that idea. It's a little bit renegade, but I think that's what we need to do, because there's just too many people graduating who don't have the real skill set to get out there and do the work, and we need people to get out there and do the work. Claire asks quickly, I'm just going to put this, are sensory disorders in children related to adversity and trauma, and if so, how can children be helped through it? Yes, they typically are. This is a big question, Claire, but basically, if a kid hasn't been born with something severe like cerebral palsy or a real genetic defect like Down syndrome, right? Or cystic fibrosis or something like that, where there's, they were born all functioning parts working, everything was there, but there's something going on. We want to look at things like birth trauma. Was there a traumatic birth? Was mom depressed? Typically, postpartum doesn't occur because of the baby. It's because of mama already being highly dysregulated, and then she has this little one, and it brings up her own trauma from her own birth when she was a baby, and then she can't attune and bond to it. I've worked with mothers that have had this trouble, and what's more important isn't so much what we do with the kids, it's what we do with the parents. And someone in my recent group who has been doing my 12-week program has a little one that has what we would call Asperger's autism spectrum. And just by this person doing the work on herself, the kids are reflexively changing, which is what we would expect. And this is going to tie into another question I'm going to answer in a second about the vagus nerve. So we want to make sure that the parents are solid, and sadly what often happens is the mums and dads don't want to look at their own stuff, and they have to. This is why we are breeding children that are so stressed and so anxious. Kids are not born into this world, they should not be born into this world anxious, but if mom, when she was carrying baby, was constantly stressed, didn't like her job, didn't like her husband, didn't like her family system that she had to maybe take care of, whatever it is, every single stress reaction that she has that goes on for too long is bathing that kid in adrenaline and in cortisol. And that little one is literally trying to get away and get away and get away from the umbilical cord. And he can't. It's like the worst form of solitary confinement. And so what happens is that little kid comes out already in a stress reaction, either shut down or like absolutely freaking out and fighting for its life. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that if children aren't allowed to freely play and roam, be sure to watch my Baby Live videos. Erin, if you can post the 2 Baby Live videos, one's rolling, one's crawling. So many kids are strapped into things. I'm seeing this thing right now where babies are being wrapped up in cloth when they don't have to be. That's not allowing them to move their body. And this body and the movement that we do as children, as infants, is what develops our capacity to process our sensations, right? Again, I talked about tribal cultures a moment ago. Kids that are in these cultures where they're crawling and moving and in the dirt and in the trees, their ability to be in their bodies and process is so much better than our white folk who do all these special things and put our kids in these things and don't allow them to freely roam. That process of crawling and moving and falling onto our butts and getting up again and going downstairs and going upstairs and getting into things, that's creating the mental maps and the capacity for the brain to wire properly. So movement is super important, and we just have so many kids that are not moving as infants in the way that they could or should. Anna Christine asks, what's your opinion on Dr. Sarno's work on chronic pain? I haven't studied his work, Christine. I've only assessed it based on what I hear other people say. I know that he was a pioneer, and I know that he's helped a lot of people. So that's the first thing. So there's good in it. What I've heard is that what he focuses on more is the emotion. There's nothing wrong with that. But what drives the emotion? The emotion is driven by the nervous system physiology. And if we don't get under that emotion and listen to the body, which is where the emotions come from the body. Specifically, they come from the neck down and from the hips up. So if we're trying to change our emotions via our thinking and our cerebral processing, we're missing this entire place that is where they come from. And it's hard when we're new at this work to understand that, because if we've had early adversity, trauma, chronic stress, we're kind of cut off from this area, or this area is so hyper aroused and oversensory that we don't know how to discern it, we don't know how to listen to it. So to work really effectively at the emotional level, we actually have to work at the body level. And that, I don't mean exercising and yoga. That isn't what I mean. It's, again, the way that I have formulated my work in my 12-week program, and of course the 21-day program, is such that we're literally working with the body, working with the quality of the body, working with our intention and our attention to the body, so that we can essentially listen to our stress physiology. This is something that Gabor Mate talks about a lot, the importance of listening and learning our stress response. It's not about behavior, and it's not about our thinking. It's about listening to the body. And it's really, really tough for me to describe what these exercises look like in this context. I know that some of the alumni are here listening, so if you guys want to chime in on your way of describing what these exercises are like, that would be awesome. But it's one of these things where you just kind of have to try it and see for yourself, which is what the 21 days is all about. So I think, again, emotions are important, but we can't just look at emotions, just like we can't just look at the body through, say, a practice like yoga, and we can't just look at the thinking through something like NLP. And this is where the blending of how I've put together the work that I've done with somatic experiencing and Feldenkrais, and my work with Kathy Kane, which is called Somatic Practice, which is helping with regulation of the entire nervous system. It kind of covers all the bases. And in watching, again, alumni go through the work, not only is their health improving, but their relationships are improving, how they think about things, how they do their work is improving. And this isn't a fluke. This is true byproduct of working with the entire organism and not just piecing out one piece and working on it and then working on this, etc. All right, I'm going to get to a question that was sent in by Sage Riverheart. That's the Facebook name. I already answered the question, Sage, about TRE. I watched a presentation about TRE, trauma release exercises, which stated that in order to go from shutdown and freeze back to baseline, the body must pass through fight, flight, sympathetic response. What's your opinion on this? I don't have an opinion. That's the truth. So if you think about it, when there is a shock to the system, so say this is your body and the pencil is a stressor, so boof, and imagine, one way is the water can go everywhere and spill everywhere, or another thing that occurs in a human system is you put in a stressor, and rather than the shattering and the water spilling out, it shuts down. But before it shuts down, that impact is going to create like a tsunami in the body. That tsunami, or tornado, or whatever you want to call it, is that fight-flight mechanism going poof, right? But then the system's like, this is too much, I gotta shut this down. Okay, that makes sense? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. So that shuts down. But within that system is still the fight flight. Within that system is still the freeze. Not the freeze. The flee, the terror, the fright, the emotion. So, in order to come out of this shutdown, we have to go through the fight flee. And what occurs in way too many practices that are very cathartic, or that to try to shake the system up, especially through like breath work, a lot of meditation work, this happens where a system is so shut down and then we give it this dose of something and it opens up so quickly that all the fight and flee energy is felt in an instant. And that is absolutely overwhelming. This is what happens when people have big Kundalini experiences and they can't contain it. This is what happens when people say they're having a nervous breakdown. Nervous breakdowns aren't necessarily bad, but they're bad when we can't contain them and release that nervous energy in little drops. Little drops. So yes, and this is one of the trickiest things when people come into my work and they have been shut down and in a functional freeze state for their entire life, and they sleep well, they can do everything, and then they start to release this stuff and everything feels horrible. It's not to scare you guys, but it's just to be truthful in that if there is stored up fight, flee energy, you're going to feel that stuff as it comes out. And the best way to work with that is, I always say this, you've got to have the education on board, because if you don't have the education, you will think that you're losing your mind. You will think that your body is having a heart attack, when really what it's feeling is stored up adrenaline and terror and rage and anger and sadness that has been shoved into your system since maybe even before you were born. So for us to work with this intelligently in a titrated way, we need to start with education and then the slow practices to open up the system in a very soft and easy way so that things just don't go kind of kaboom. Yes, you need the knowledge to cope. Exactly, Katina. So the other question from Sage. Oh, good, Susie. I'm glad this makes complete sense, all caps. It does make complete sense. So another question. I've heard that acting out anger, crying, shaking can actually be counterproductive because it re-traumatizes the system and digs the anger, crying, etc. grooves deeper into the nervous system. What do you think? Yes. That's pretty much exactly, your question is a statement. So yeah, and again, I just spoke about this when we do things like deep breath work or deep meditation work, cathartic work where you're taking a baseball bat and hitting things, which is what they do in things like Landmark, which I am not in any way supportive of, is when we release this stuff in a way that's cathartic, typically we're not connecting it to the physiology, we're not connecting it to the emotion, and when that happens, all that we notice is the crying, all that we notice is the fist hitting, all that we notice is the screaming, and we're not integrating it with our actual felt sense experience. And a lot of the times with these big emotive cathartic responses, which was very much popular like post World War II, like the Reichian movements and bioenergetics, is that we feel really good afterwards because the endorphins, right, have been released, and it gives us this feeling of euphoria. Walk out. I live in Vancouver. There's a lot of yoga here. The thing that just cracks me up and also makes me really sad is you watch a lot of people come out of these yoga classes, especially the Kundalini ones, and people look so calm to the point where they look like zombies. There's no social engagement. They're sort of just in this dulled state. And in that dulled state is most likely stored up stress that just got nicely padded down. So we need to be really careful about these big acting out things, because if we act out too much, it can, is just as you said, it can rebound and go deeper. And what's often occurring is the acting out happens, a person feels something so big and it's unconscious, but they micromanage that feeling and that sensation and that emotion, and then they, like you said, they bury it into their system so deep. And it's unfortunate because they're going to these classes because they want to get better, but what's happening is because their system is so brilliant at overriding, they might feel really good for a few days afterwards, but those real deep patterns have actually not been rewired and surfaced. I'm just reading. So Sage says, other question has here, working at the level of the stress organs. So you read an article that I must have written on aggression, that working at the level of the stress organs is essential. Yeah, it is essential, especially when we've had early trauma, because our organs, specifically our kidney, adrenals, our brainstem, our gut, and really our tissues, are in a state of, really, it depends on the type of trauma, but unsafety, threat, and often the words that come out of a person is, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. The world is a dangerous place, and I better grasp and clench and contract to keep myself safe from this dangerous world. And that dangerous world was usually the home environment, the parental environment, the school environment, that kind of thing. So working at this level of the stress organs is essential, yes. When we're in a cycle of unresolved survival energy and the brain is signaling danger to the stress organs and related chemistry, which turns the signals back to the brain. This is a loop that is really hard to break. I think you're just stating something that I've written. So yes, we need to go in and interrupt the signal of the stress chemistry literally scaring itself. There's an article, it's actually a series of articles that I wrote that if all of you want to kind of dive into this idea of stress chemistry, how our organ systems and our body will continually scare itself because of our old patterns, will create this feedback loop where we're just constantly recapitulating a stress response. It's not necessarily a re-traumatization, but it's this like loop that we can't get out of. Erin, if you can post those articles, that series of 3, one with the cat kind of scared and then the other ones. But here, what happens, is people do lots of good work. They improve their nutrition, they do mindfulness practice, they may do, nonviolent communication where they're learning how to communicate with their partners and their kids. And that's all fine. If the underlying stress physiology has never been addressed, all we're doing is putting a fancy package on top of that and getting a little bit better. But as we get a little bit better, in that better is still this unresolved survival energy. And again, from doing this work specifically since 2008, and being in the healing, health, fitness world since 1995, which is crazy, this is really the missing link. And what occurs is when you can work with this stress level physiology, and this is why I think this can be very threatening work to a lot of people in the health industry, you don't need anything else. So when you get out of the stress chemistry and you heal these deep traumas, you naturally start to eat better. You naturally have a desire to want to go out and get movement and exercise. You naturally have creative thinking coming in. You're naturally more organized. You naturally can connect with other people. And you naturally set up boundaries. And so to bring this level of awareness of the biology and how we get bathed in our stress chemistry, and say to the whole industry, this is what we really need to do, is very threatening, because it means that they aren't skilled and know what to do. And then they start to hear that a lot of the people that work on this work no longer need the nutrition advice, and they no longer need the exercise advice, and they no longer need the relationship advice, and they no longer need the money advice. And that's scary. But if we really want to look at, again, I talked about this at the very beginning of this call, the macro level, to heal this deep, deep wound that is humanity right now, we need to work at this stress chemistry level. And we really know, based on a lot of things going on in our government, I'm in Canada, but of course, I'm around and watching everything going on. The bulk of what we do and what we see, all the violence, the crime, the bad decisions, it's based out of a reaction to threat, to danger, stress. Very little decisions are made based on intellectual engagement with the intuitive body and knowing what is really going to be good long term. Everything is short term, right? This is where the pharmaceutical industry got us to. How can we work on things short term and not really get to the meat of things? Sherry asks, hey, Irene, hi. The next 12-week program, so my long-term Smart Body, Smart Mind, 12-week nervous system rewire, I know it's a mouthful, it'll start up again on Tuesday, October 17th. It'll go for 13 weeks this round, because we're going to take a week off at Christmas for those that respect the holidays over the New Year and the Christmas break. So there we go. I'm going to go to another question from Roxanne. She posted the other day, so I've got this on paper. She asks, this is a more complex question, so if you don't know the physiology, just kind of listen and hopefully you'll learn something. So if the ventral vagus nerve is myelinated, why does it take longer to develop regulation through this nerve versus the dorsal vagal, which is unmyelinated and processes more quickly? So here's the thing. We've got this autonomic nervous system, which is fight, flight, and rest, digest. Okay, so there's two branches. The parasympathetic nervous system, the rest, digest, has two branches. One is called the ventral vagal. So right now, as you guys listen to me and as I talk, we are engaging. Granted, you're not in a high stress response or super shut down. You're using your ventral vagal social engagement nervous system. The other branch of the parasympathetic is what we would call the dorsal vagal parasympathetic nervous system. That's the one that puts us into rest digest. To make things even more complicated, the dorsal has not two branches, but it has a spectrum, high tone and low tone dorsal. We want to live most of the time in what's called low tone. High tone is what we go into when we go into shock, when we go into severe shutdown. The dorsal branch that puts us into the shutdown or into rest digest, it is not myelinated, meaning the nerves on it aren't covered in this fatty layer. And it's a very primitive nerve or bunch of nerves. It's what we share with other reptiles and deep sea fish that don't need a lot of oxygen. Stephen Porges that coined this vagus nerve idea, it's called the polyvagal theory. He calls the dorsal the dumb vagus, like D-U-M-B, the dumb vagus, because it turns on super quickly, but it also turns on so quickly that it puts the system into shock. So when we see like an animal go into freeze because it's a threat, like the possums do this, basically that dorsal vagal is going and it's just shocking the system into shutdown. Now the social engagement one, when we're born, we need to build that up. It's not crafted properly. And the one that creates this engagement is myelinated. It takes longer to develop because we have to myelinate it. We have to build it up. We have to beef it up. And that happens through engagement with our caregiver. So what occurs, this is why early adversity, poor attunement creates illness and anxiety and chronic mental illness later in life, is that when we don't have that healthy, yummy attunement and interaction, learning how to self-soothe via our caregiver's ventral vagus nerve, if they didn't have a good ventral vagus nerve formed, we don't learn because they don't have one that's healthy that we can borrow and model from. Well, we don't borrow, we don't take it out of them, but we're modeling. So the myelination takes longer because it's a much more complex nerve, and Stephen Porges would call this, it's the smart vagus. I should use a different pen color. It's the smart vagus. So that smart vagus nerve takes longer to develop because it's more evolved, right? Reptiles basically, right, lower on the evolved chain of evolution, they don't engage. They're quick, right? They're fight, flight, fight, flight. They freeze, then they go. They freeze, they go. Humans, primates, mammals, dogs, cats, we have this capacity to connect because we have this myelinated vagus, but it takes a lot longer to develop it, and it's smarter and it's more refined. So when we are anxious, we want this myelinated ventral vagus nerve to come on, and what it does is not only does it connect us to the environment and it brings us into our higher brain function, it also directly attaches to our pacemaker in our heart to slow it down. So it slows it down slowly. So when we have this myelinated, good, parasympathetic ventral vagal nerve on, the vagus nerve on, it brings our heart rate down slowly. Versus if we never got it, my pencil, when we sense a threat and our system goes into arousal and all we really have to rely on is this unmyelinated dorsal, we like shut down, right? Our heart rate, vroom. This is what occurs with people who have the condition POTS, where their blood pressure it goes up, but then it spikes down and they pass out, or they faint because they can't maintain good blood pressure because the dorsal just shuts it down. I know most of you saw that little baby that was being ohmed at in that video, went viral about a week or so ago. That baby is in an arousal and then it is being shut down. When a baby gets calmed, it doesn't just go from wailing to shutting down. It starts to coo, and it has some breaths, and then it expands itself, and it gets little by bit by bit by bit by bit, and then it's calm. That's engaging with the ventral vagal. That's helping that little baby myelinate the goodness that's going to give it good health for the rest of its life. But if we only teach that baby how to shut down due to a loud sound, it's going to just only learn how to go to dorsal whenever it's feeling aroused. So that is like the best way to show like what not to do versus watching a mother soothe her baby with engagement and calm voice and eye contact and holding connection. That will form that. I hope this is all useful, you guys. Okay. The other question Roxanne had, why is it that some children when tired become more hyperactive? I could make a guess. I mean, this isn't something that I think about often, but usually, a lot of kids, in our culture at least, when bedtime comes around, at that point of the day, they've often had very little engagement with their primary caregivers, right? They've been at school, or mom and dad have been away, they've just been with a nanny, and all of a sudden their favorite person, their connection, their lifeline is there. They're super tired and they want to engage, they want to connect, right? And so that's one thing, is that hyperactivity I've seen is just this desire to connect, even though the day is over and they're done. And they can't, because there's no more there. So they spike up a bit of adrenaline to get that engagement, so they feel like they've connected in that moment with that caregiver. So that could be one of the reasons. I'm kind of speculating there. Karen had a question. My question is, how can I avoid blowing up my system, scaring myself to death? I am doing everything I can to titrate with my trauma therapist, but I feel like the tidal wave is getting closer and I may be swept away to the hospital again. Every attempt to get in my body brings more and more terror. So Karen, I apologize. I can't remember if you are in either of my programs. But even if your trauma therapist is not SE trained and you haven't specified, it can and if they aren't SE training with training in the work that Kathy Kane does, which is working at these deep levels of regulation of the stress chemistry, often a therapist will miss, okay, you say no, they'll miss the subtle cues where you are going over your edge. And if you are someone that has this history of being caught in a stress reaction, you have probably become really, really good at overriding your sensations. That's my guess. And overriding your emotions, and kind of micromanaging. And so when you go into this therapist session, often, sessions are an hour long and we got to stick to that hour. And sometimes all that a system can handle is 5 minutes. Little tiny bit, and that's it. And so what I would love to suggest, if you haven't tried my 21-day program, is to give it a go, because it'll first teach you the basics of the education and then initiate you into these little tiny ways of tuning into your environment and into your body. Because from the sounds of it, what I call your capacity, it's still quite small and there's a lot of stress inside, and we don't want to open it up too fast. If we open up too fast, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is too big, this is too much, this is too scary, I'm going to shut back down. So we want to open it up slowly and slowly and slowly so it can stay there. We often have this feeling like, to do really good therapy, we have to get it all out and cry and scream, and that might happen sometimes, but typically a good trauma healing session from a somatic level, not much happens. Very little bit happens. Little bits of energy might be felt. So that's my suggestion, is if every attempt to getting into your body brings more and more terror, what might have to happen is you have to probably get more into your environment and into the edges outside of your body first, because going inside is too terrifying. So I just want to acknowledge that what you say is 100% valid. If we were brought up in a situation where we were in terror internally all the time, where's the last thing that we want to go to? Inside. It's too terrifying. But then we get sick because we can't connect to this. So we have to connect with it in a very small, piece by piece way. You're welcome. Oh, and then the other piece to that question you have, I also have an impulse to lay on the floor in a fetal position in therapy. I started out first a few months ago doing this. I have to fight not to do this. Here's the thing, Karen. Someone came into my office and that's what they wanted to do. I would let them do that. I would let them sit in that position and then I would just be there. I know that seems like a waste of money, but sometimes clients come in and we just sit and I don't even look at them. and they can look at me. Sometimes all they do is look at my hair. That is sometimes all that a person can manage because their early attunement was so messed up, right? It wasn't proper. So if there's an urge, this is one thing I teach in my trainings, following the impulse is to be in that position, then be in that position. And if your therapist can't understand why that isn't important, then I would suggest finding someone else who can, because that's what your system wants. And if you can be in that position and have connection and know that it's safe and know that it's okay, then things can start to move, because that's safety. So you need to be in your safe spot so that you can start going into this a little bit more. Okay. You guys are awesome. Let me see if there's anything else that has come through. I feel like I've been talking a mile a minute. Jessie asks, hi Irene, hello. I realize I need to deal with my repressed anger, but I can't access it as it just feels sad for the person who caused my trauma. I just realized I have to deal with my repressed anger, but I can't access it as it just feels sad for the person who caused my trauma. Does this work you do help access and heal this anger? I do see a counselor too. Yes. So anger is one of the most important and probably one of the most difficult emotions to work with, often because it's highly coupled with shame. And basically, working with anger is not as easy as just saying, okay, I'm going to work with my anger today. Like, it has to come slowly and spontaneously. And for example, right now in my 12-week program, we're in week 7. We are just starting to look at this from around the edges. We're like peering into the diving pool, right? We're not going in it yet. We've spent the first 5-6 weeks laying the foundation so that a person can sense their body, be in their body, know when they have to get out of their body, knowing when they need to connect with someone, knowing when they need to be a little more introverted. And the biggest thing about anger is safety. If a person doesn't feel safe doing something that is helping stimulate the anger response, what we call healthy aggression response, then it's futile. This is the trouble with a lot of these cathartic practices where we're asking someone to just emit a gesture of anger out. If a person does not feel comfortable and if it's not spontaneously arising, then we're basically asking the person to go against their will. We're putting them into unsafe territory. And what happens when we're in that? We then fight back or we shut down. We fight back or we shut down. So working with anger takes a lot of, to do it well, takes time. It takes reconnecting with the body, because what I said earlier, where are all the emotions in the body? So we need to reconnect with the body. And often what happens is when we do that, spontaneously, these energies start to come up and out naturally. So someone might all of a sudden feel this desire to just like snarl or to squeeze something or to scream or to hit, and it's naturally coming out. As opposed to me saying, okay, I want to take your fists and pretend that you're pissed. That doesn't work, right? This is why TRE, that trauma release exercise stuff I was mentioning a moment ago, it kind of isn't spontaneous. What's happening in those lessons is that we're instigating a trigger to get the body into a contraction. Very different than somebody processing an old memory and the tremoring and the shaking coming up naturally. Very different. So with anger, it's so important for us to work at it, not from the bottom up and not from the top down, but with the whole system. Yeah, Kristen, anger and shame. The reason why shame is attached to it so badly is for most of us, I have yet to meet a human being on this planet that has been taught how to handle anger and express anger from the beginning as a child, right? Most babies, when they start to punch and pull mother's hair, are told to stop, right? That is the first entry point into us telling our young that their aggression and their life force energy is not okay. Doesn't mean we are going to have our hair pulled out, but it's like, wow, like you're like, look at that strength. You're pulling my hair. It's like, oh, I feel those fists. I feel that, like I'm feeling that. I feel you. I see you, and it's okay. But typically with babies, where a lot of babies will get slapped, they'll be told to stop. That's not okay. You're hurting mommy, all those things. But it actually is an important part of emotional development when that little infant starts to do those things. And then, of course, when we get older, toddler age, tantrums happen because a little person isn't allowed to express their emotion from a very deep physiological level. And so they build up, build up, build up. There's so much build up, and then they just can't take it anymore because they're in that Walmart and there's so much bright light and it's hot and it stinks and there's people everywhere, and then that's when kids have these meltdowns, right? And all that stored up emotion just comes out. But if we can teach these little ones through our own learning as adults how to be with that aggression, like, oh, I see you you're pissed. Like, yes, I'm pissed. It's like, what is it like to stomp your feet, right? Very rarely, if a child stomps their feet, do we encourage it, right? We think they're silly, or, oh, isn't that cute? She's stomping her feet. And that stomping, that little tantrum is there for a reason. So this anger thing is so full circle because it's more than just learning how to express it. It's understanding how deep it goes and how deep it was shut down from the beginning. Cool. I'm glad that makes sense. Mary asks, what is spiritual bypassing? I'm not sure I understand this term. Could you say a little bit about it, please? I imagine it's not about processing anger and such correctly. Yeah. Spiritual bypassing, I have a very good and long article on Medium on mindfulness and why I feel the mindfulness industry is going to burst like a bubble, kind of like the financial crisis happened in 2008. I'm seeing it happen, and I'm pretty convinced that the mindfulness industry is going to burst soon. I actually hope it will, right? Because it's going to wake a lot of people up. But spiritual bypassing, and the other good one, Erin, if you can post, is that article and then the interview I did with Chris Durkee on meditation and mindfulness. Be sure to watch those, Mary. But basically bypassing, it's kind of they use the word spiritual because it's going into spiritual practices, more energy-based practices, and bypassing the emotion, bypassing the body. And often it can also be only feeling the good emotions and not looking at the dark emotions, right? And we need to look at the dark. We need to look at the dark side. We need to look at the light side. We need to look at both. And what happens in the bypassing world of this is a lot of people that think they're in a good state. They're all love and light. They're all namaste and bliss and everything's great. But when you really look at these people, they're often very zombied. I call them Zen zombies. I think I wrote an article called Zen Zombies and Fitness Freaks quite a while ago. But they're zombied out, and it's because they're in that shutdown. They're in a functional freeze, usually because, again, our culture has not taught people to get into their bodies in a titrated way that's manageable. We've asked people to go in too fast, too soon, and a lot of the folks that are spiritually bypassing are in deep meditative practices so much, and they're not doing it properly. So for those of you interested in this, definitely watch the interview I did with Chris Durkee. Erin just popped it up. It's in the feed. Meditation was not meant for stress relief. That's the key piece that we take out of that. Meditation was not meant for trauma healing. Meditation's real purpose is for spiritual development. And what we've done is we've plucked out these practices from the East and we've put them into the West, but it's like an invasive species of plant. Like that plant is meant to stay in the East because that way of life is monastic, it's calm, it's not fast-paced. These monks didn't have kids, they didn't have jobs, they didn't have to cook their food, they didn't have to drive on highways, they didn't have, many of them did have trauma typically, but it was different, right? Because many monks are monks because they were adopted, right? That kind of thing. So these people are living this spiritual life that is very different to our current Western culture. And what we're doing is we're asking these stressed out, highly traumatized, misattuned, can't connect to the body people to do these sitting, spiritually based meditative practices. And it's like we're putting them out into the ocean with a sailboat, and they have no clue how to work the sailboat. And they're just kind of hanging on to this boat, not even knowing that they're supposed to be doing stuff with whatever it is that you have on a sailboat, right? And this is why, here's the thing, and I'll maybe end on this. If we do really good practice on ourselves, we don't need to sit for 30 minutes every day. There's no need. You wake up, you go about your business. But we've become so enamored with these routines and staying within a certain level of control that we keep them because it's the only thing that keeps us sane and managed. It helps us cope. But when anyone says, I have to do this to be focused, that's a serious sign that there's some nervous system dysregulation happening, because they can't get on their day without refocusing themselves. Whereas if we really think about true human health and resiliency, it's to be able to go about our day and not have to always do the same thing every day, right? This is in terms of practice. Obviously, you need to eat every day and sleep and drink water. Those are brush your teeth. Those are the things we have to do to maintain our body. But in terms of these practices that are becoming so used and in many ways abused, if we have to keep going back to them over and over, it's a sign that nothing is actually shifting. It's just keeping us in this very controlled temperature, air-conditioned controlled state. And a lot of people that are in spiritual bypass, I think it was Mary, have a lot of sensitivities typically. Everything has to be very particular. Very particular. Food has to be very particular, all these things. So I hope that's useful. We've got lots of stuff linked up here that you can check out. You could probably spend a good week going through all those resources, so please take advantage of them. And the next, like I said already, stay in this group. We're in this group, answering questions, posting comments, and if you are interested in doing this work a little deeper, my 12-week program won't start up until October 17th, but you can start the 21-day self-study course anytime. You could start it today. Erin could actually pop that link up if you want to check it out. Check it out, have a read what other people say, but it really, thus far, getting into this work, again, not my words, my client's words, it will change everything. It'll be the missing link. I can pretty much guarantee that based on what we've seen, based on how people have shifted their whole scope of life when they get into this nervous system stuff on a real deep level. All right. Thank you everyone to being here on this Monday. If you're not listening to this on Monday, if you're listening to the recording, thanks for taking the time to listen to this when I'm not live. I know it's not often as fun, but thank you for listening anyway. And there we go. All right, I'm going to sign off.